to Friday Night Frights before? I am Josh.
I am Sebastian.
We do horror movies, usually 2 to 3 shows a month all year long, so if you like horror movies, you should be checking us out. Let's get on with the show, because we started a little late, and we've got a big, crazy Q&A we're doing here.
All-star.
For Stephen King's Sleepwalkers. But before we bring up anyone involved in the movie, first we're going to bring up Mr. Anders Holmes from Comedy Central's Workaholics. And you might be asking yourself, why are you bringing up a guy who wasn't involved with this movie in any way? And it was because he came to us and was like, hey, I'd really like to show Sleepwalkers. Why was that?
It's amazing. So, have people seen it?
How many people have seen Sleepwalkers? Just gonna show our hands.
How many people have not seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to do Short Circuit 2 here like a few months ago, or many months ago. That movie's the shit. And then I just was like, I think I might have been just laying in bed and was like, Sleepwalkers was my shit. And then I was like, oh, I wonder if they've already shown it at CineFamily. And then I emailed you guys and you hadn't. And I was like, you're fools. And then here we are. But Sleepwalkers to me, and I'm gonna age myself to some of you guys at least, was one of those movies where like you'd go to the video rental store, and you'd just look at all the boxes, and usually you would go to horror, and anything that said Stephen King on it, I was like, well, I'm gonna rent that for sure. And then Sleepwalkers was like, oh, I don't know, like the cover was like a little mysterious. There wasn't like anybody's face on it. I just remembered like the cat scratches and was like, rented it and was just blown away by like how perfectly it was casted, how creepy the tone was, and there's so many moments from the movie that have just kind of like stuck with me. And that's why I can't wait to watch it tonight.
Did you have, like, for me, because similar thing, when I first rented it as a kid, I thought it was really scary, and then like the more I saw it as I got older, at some point I was like, wait, this movie is funny as well. No, never had this. Still terrified.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my god, I remember when she was like grabbing her panties and like trying to hide them, and I thought it was so cool.
Did it give you weird feelings about your mom? It did for me.
I mean, what's weird, man? You know? Society's opening up.
Well, next, we have so many guests here. Let's do it in little increments so we don't overwhelm people. Let's bring up Mr. Mick Garris, the director of this film. We'll keep inching down here.
Thanks so much.
Now, actually far more so as far as sheer numbers than even Mr. Frank Darabont, you've kind of got a little cottage industry of Stephen King adaptation.
That's true.
Maybe we just start off by telling us how you even got into the Stephen King business.
Well, this was the first one. And he had director approval, and he viewed Psycho 4 and another movie that will remain nameless by another director who shall remain nameless. I had my first meeting at Columbia before it was Sony. And they said, we love you, you get this, we want you to do it, but we have to meet with another director just because we have this relationship with his agents and we have to do this just for that. So they hired the other director. And then he started rewriting it and turning it into Sleepwalkers in Space. And it was no longer Stephen King's Sleepwalkers. And they wanted Stephen King's Sleepwalkers. So they asked me to come back and meet with them, but what I did not realize is that they were moving me into an office and hiring me that day. I had no idea. I thought I was dancing again for them. And so King and I, we didn't meet until the day he shot his cameo, and if you haven't seen the movie, there's a cameo, there's one shot that has Toby Hooper, Stephen King, and Clive Barker all together. And it's really a ton of fun. That morning, I was having my breakfast granola and broke my tooth. and broke and had to go down and get a crown on the day they were all going to be there, and I was going to meet Steve in person for the first time. But he loved the movie so much that he asked me to do the stand afterwards, and we really got close on that because he was an executive producer of that and was there for half of the shoot, and then ever since we've had a really great personal and professional relationship.
And I guess good segue since you brought it up. Was that your idea or King's idea to have all the horror director cameos in the film?
Well, you know, I figured, first of all of them were friends of mine, and they all loved Stephen King, and I thought it would be so much fun for us to be in a theater with the other people and go, oh, there's Stephen King, you know, look, there's Clive Barker. And actually, you could quite easily cut that head of the scene off and not affect the movie in any way, but it wouldn't have been as cool. So yeah, I plead guilty, but Steve likes to act in them too. And he was playing kind of a cornball character, which he seems to excel at.
How many is it total? It's King, Barker, Toby Hooper, Joe
Dante, and John
Rice. And in keeping, I realize you brought some horror director friends just to watch the movie here.
Yeah, well, I didn't bring them. They came in. First of all, Dave Parker came here, and William Malone, and Tom McLaughlin, and writers like David Scow. I mean, it's really some wonderful people.
John Gulager.
And Gulager is here. I didn't know he was going to be here till I got here. So, I mean, I'm kind of humbled by having these great peers here with me to share this movie experience at 12:30 at night.
Well, who should we bring up next?
Well, you want to do it alphabetical? I don't.
Let's just bring up everyone. Why not? Let's get crazy. We've got stars Brian Krause and Magic Amick. We've got
Cindy Pickett. And the makeup effects master Tony Gardner. This is the first time I've seen Brian in a long time, and I'm so happy about this. And same with Cindy. Machen and I worked together last year. We did an episode of her series, The Witches of East End, up in Vancouver, where we did Masters of Horror for 2 seasons. And Tony, of course, had done Psycho 4 for me before we did this. And Michael was one of the Sleepwalker creatures. So by the time we show the movie, it's going to be 4 in the morning.
Well, can you talk a little bit about just putting the film together, getting the cast on board? I think you guys were married at the time. Cindy, I always thought it was interesting that the parents from Ferris Bueller's Day Off are also the parents in Sleepwalkers. How did that casting happen?
It was cheaper as a package.
Are we on? We after Ferris Bueller, it was such an item that we did. She's having a baby. John, you know, he's having a baby, and Mick brought us on for this movie, so it was kind of cool.
Well, they were the perfect Indiana married couple.
Yeah,
you know?
right. And I was pregnant, so you know, I was perfect. We were perfect.
It was an amazing casting situation. I mean, Alice Kree died. I had loved her in Ghost Story so much, and that was the reason I brought her on board. And Machen, of course, at the time had just done Twin Peaks, and everybody fell in love with Machen in Twin Peaks. I fell in love with her even more from her dance, which you'll see in Sleepwalkers.
That was fun.
And then Brian had just worked with the studio. They had recommended Brian because he had just done the Return to the Blue Lagoon. And so they were very high on bringing him in and had me meet him, and I was really impressed. Not only by how good he is and how good looking he is, but how really enthusiastic and excited he was to be a part of this. You know? And I kind of think that's a hallmark of what everybody was like on the show. Everybody was really committed to it, because it's kind of silly.
You have to be committed, otherwise.
Or you will be committed after.
But you're so delightful, you know. You made everyone want to work with you. So.
Oh shucks.
Yeah.
Well, Well, I know the film still frightens Anders, but can you talk a little bit about
I can't handle it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the tone? Was like, I mean, I guess you had King's blessing on it helping you out, but was that ever a problem? Were they concerned that it was getting too funny?
You know, the script was even funnier. The attack when you're in the graveyard, you and Machen, when you poke his eye out, spoiler alert. There were so many more punchlines that Brian delivered, and it was almost like Freddy Krueger, and I thought it was too funny for that. And we kind of took it seriously, even though it was so ridiculous. And, being saved by 126 cats and things like that was amazing. Spoilers again. But, there was a lot of humor in there. There was even more that I think kind of destroyed the tension of that scene, which already has, look at this shirt, my mother's going to kill me, and a couple of lines like that. But in a way, it got in the way of that. So hopefully there's a balance of, it's a drive-in movie is what King called it. Not quite a moron movie, which is what he called the one that he directed, Maximum Overdrive.
See, but from what I read, I thought it was gonna, I was like, oh, this is really dark and sexy with the whole incest, and I just was like, ooh,
Well, and I had just done that in Psycho 4, which I think is why he hired me. Don't tell my mother.
But then eventually I got, oh, this is actually like funny. I didn't know.
Well, it's supposed to kind of coax you in a little bit, as a horror film, and then, you can kind of embrace the humor, and Joe Dante's kind of the master at disarming you with humor and then hitting you with a hit.
Well, I remember you told me the tone was American Werewolf in London is one of the notes of how to kind of go about it.
Because David Naughton played that very straight, and the situations were ridiculous.
Well, you said King's script was even funnier. Obviously, he's not here, but you know him well. Maybe you can answer a little bit. And correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of remember that at the time the movie was coming out, it was sort of hyped as this was the first movie King had written that isn't also based on one of his stories. Do you know why he decided to write this film?
Well, I think some things you write for the reader to read, and this was, nobody wants to read this book, I would, but then I have no taste. But, I think it was recreational for him. And I must say, at this time, he did not have as much respect for screenwriting as he did for novel writing. He told me that during the production of The Stand. That was where he discovered a newfound respect, that a good screenplay is as good, as valid a piece of writing as a good novel is, because he was adapting his most successful and popular novel at that time and put his whole heart into that. This, I think, was more of a lark. I think he was really writing a movie he wanted to see, something that had elements that would draw him to the drive-in or to the World Theater, if you remember that, in town here. So I think it's a recreational horror movie.
And Brian, when you read the script, you thought it was dark and sexy. You have to do some awesomely crazy things in the film. Were you ever worried at any point about it?
Well,
Don't tell him a couple of those directions I gave you.
yeah.
Tell us.
No. I think part of it was, we're not really mother and son. I mean, we're creatures, so that's how I
Rationalized.
that's how I got through it.
Yeah, but it was Alice Krieger, so who cares?
Yeah, it was like, oh my God, how nervous was I at 22? Holy crap. It's Stephen King. I think it's just the excitement about it. It's Stephen King. Growing up, it's just a wonderful opportunity to be a part of it. I was just excited.
Well, you had also done the Return to the Blue Lagoon, so you were comfortable with
Being naked? Sure.
Anders, do you have any burning questions for?
So, what I found super interesting to me, at least, was like the female lead character. She wasn't like being.
Sexy.
No. She was like nervous around the guy. You know what I mean? Which you never really saw. The girl was always kind of cool, and the guy was bumbling or whatever. I was wondering if that was in the script or that was something you kind of laid on top of it.
Oh, that I was sort of nervous and vulnerable.
Yeah, that like you were a 10 and yet somehow you were very nervous around a guy. But I found it like refreshing.
That was mixed directing. It was being goofy, taking the dance really seriously, and then being caught doing something you really didn't expect anybody to watch, you know? And he's really adorable. So I had an immediate,
I think I was more nervous
rush.
than she was at.
And I did some really good popcorn in the hair acting, right? I nailed it.
I
Oh, sorry,
expected the
spoiler
award
alert
for
again.
that. You know, I thought there would be best popcorn.
Yeah.
And I don't know why you weren't even nominated.
I know. So.
Well, let's talk cats. How many cats total?
126.
And some extras that just showed up.
Well,
Do you remember that?
they did, but there's also a lot more on that lot since then. And that's not counting the dead ones.
Wait, did some really die?
No. There were some already dead. You know, the opening scene with
Yeah.
the tree? Those are real.
How, I mean, what was that set? Like, I think it's a nightmare to try to get one cat into like a car to go anywhere. How on earth could you wrangle that many cats?
It was kind of a, well, I'm going to tell you something that may make you wince too. But I mean, the trainers were great, but you know, when they're all outside of the house, sitting and watching, they all have little harnesses that are nailed into the lawn. And so there's 125 cats there. They couldn't go anywhere if they wanted to.
I was going to ask what the hardest thing about the shoot was, but now I know.
It was kind of the easiest thing about the shoot.
But
Once
isn't that
they're
way
stuck to their
better?
own.
Isn't that way better than CGI? What we do with CGI now? That's so much more interesting.
Yeah. We were the second CGI movie. T2 came out before we came out, but we were doing CGI when they were, so we had never seen Terminator 2. And the morphing process had only been done in T2 and in the Michael Jackson black and white video.
Wow.
So it was really groundbreaking and time-consuming stuff.
But that's when they actually use CGI creatively and not just, let's just make everything CGI. Let's just put creatures everywhere else CGI. That drives me insane. Do like a combination of, just be creative with it, you know?
And organic.
And organic. And work for it.
And it was a very specific sort of CGI. You don't see as much now, very much early 90s was the morphing CGI. Well, with the trailer we had for it, every time I was here we showed it, the audience who possibly hasn't seen the movie would just lose their mind when we showed the shot where Brian's head morphs into like 10 different things in like 4 seconds.
Including the baby, the child of Jeff Oken, our visual effects supervisor. His 2-year-old son was the baby head in that morph.
Who was it supposed to be in the morph though? Like him as a young boy?
Who gives a shit?
Let's talk a little bit about the practical effects since we have Tony here. You have a mic, right?
I do.
Can you just talk about the makeup design?
It changed a lot as we went along. Like Mick said, it was one of the first films where there was CG used. Like the scene in the car, we sculpted heads for each one of those looks because the CG artists didn't really exist then. So they were just morphing between literal physical heads. And we had a bunch of designs for the cat, and I remember at least the studio getting more involved with the creature suits than they really should have. We did a makeup test on the lot at Universal, and the original paint job and look for the cat was, it was painted very translucent, like a fetus, like a baby, and we'd slime them up, and it was really interesting. And I remember the computer guys came up to us while we were filming it, and they go, could you paint that flat orange so that when we put the glow on it, it's easier for us to track it and the glow will be more uniform?
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, we had there were a lot of cooks in the creature cat kitchen. It's like everybody got involved. It felt like Teddy Z and all those guys because it was something different and something unique. But the goal was obviously everything being practical because there was no other option. So, and poor Brian bore a lot of it, and so did Mike.
And Mike, yeah, he was inside the full suit during the dance and getting his eye poked. Oh,
Yeah, it was really cool. It's like I was Charlie Sleepwalker, and at that time I was doing a lot of creatures and everything, and I just really loved it. It was really cool. I like the movements of it and everything. It's like really cool. And one thing that in particular I remember that was like, there's a scene where they're making love and they pan around to the mirror, and it's like the humans turn into us. And it was Karen Malkus who played the mother sleepwalker, and I'm on top of her. We're like having sex, simulated sex and everything. Everything's like really quiet. It's like, okay, yeah, move it a little bit, yeah. And it was like, I wasn't embarrassed. It was just like really close. And we just kind of got into the rhythm of it. But I remember everything was like really.
But Mike, it wasn't because of you. It was because of Brian and Alice, who were not wearing rubber.
But anyway, it was really cool. It was really cool.
By the way, that scene got us in trouble with the ratings board. We had to go back 5 times with 5 different cuts before we got an R rating. And the scene was originally intended to all play in one shot. We start on the mirror, we go down to the clothes on the floor and across the bed, and the 2 naked bodies of mother and son making love. And then the mirror was actually a cutout with glass, and on the other side was a reverse set. So it looked like a mirror reflection, and then Michael and Karen were doing their thing. And they had a TV monitor in there so that they could see how Brian and Alice moved. And to do that at the same time took a lot of rehearsal. But because Brian's buttocks was moving up and down, they wouldn't let me do it. I had to cut it instead of this one long, elegant shot that was poetic and magical and then ends up being really creepy. Once you think, it's kind of titillating at first and then it turns into something much darker than that. They wouldn't let me do it because of the rating would have been an X rating. Yeah, exactly. So. Because the simulated sex, because they were both naked, and your rump was rocking.
Change.
You're welcome. Did you ever get any pushback from the violence against the cats themselves?
The cats are heroes.
No, but I just mean, I'm always surprised that Americans don't care about people getting blown up in their movies, but it's like if a dog gets hurt, it's like, oh, this movie's disgusting.
I have a little story. It's like some years ago, I had my neighbor Vicky. I said, "Watch Sleepwalkers." She said, "Oh yeah, let me borrow it." So she's like she loves animals and everything, animal activist and what have you. She's very sensitive about any animal abuse, right? Any type of animal. So anyway, she comes back and knocks on my door. She goes, "God damn it! You didn't tell me about the beginning because those were all those dead cats." She was like really pissed. I said, I didn't mean it. I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't mean it. But she was like really highly upset, and so she didn't watch the rest of the movie. I said, "Oh, come on!" It's like,
well, obviously no cats were hurt.
Yeah.
Not only because of the law, but also because I'm a big animal activist as well.
Exactly.
But except for nailing them to the wall.
That was for their own safety.
It was. Say thank you. I'll use that. But no, obviously no animals were hurt, and there were a lot of them, and there was a lot of care given to them and all. But they also had a good time. When they're running through the town, slightly slow motion, all of their tails are up, and I think they're advertising.
Fun fact, I'm allergic to cats. Just remember that as you're watching it.
Well, Cindy, maybe you want to talk about getting your arm broken and the wonderful things that happen when you get killed?
The only thing I remember is that plate glass window. I remember my husband lying there in a pool of blood and my stunt double. I wanted to go through that window so badly myself, but they wouldn't let me.
But the one thing that Cindy talked about the most was, oh no, the stunt double went through and ended up on her back with her legs splayed.
Right.
And I was like, this is what I've got to match?
That's right, that's right.
Thank you
Oh
very
my
much.
God.
Yeah.
I haven't seen this in 23 or 24 or
Well,
23
you're in for a
years.
treat.
Yeah, really.
Tell them about how strong Alice Krige is.
Oh, yeah.
There's a scene where Alice Krige pulls Machen up over her shoulders and carries her away. We had a stunt woman, a stunt double, to do that. The stunt double couldn't do it. And Alice said, move over. She's tough. She's tough. She was great. And she did it all herself. It was not
Well,
intended.
why didn't they let me go through the plate glass window myself?
That's a little more dangerous than carrying Machen.
I was pregnant.
You were correct.
Did you really bite off Ron Perlman's fingers?
Yes. You know, he wears a Harold Lloyd glove.
God, that's method. Anders, do you have any more questions?
I'm good. I'm ready to go.
Cool.
Oh, we have to watch the movie?
Yeah.
Ready to watch.
You guys ready to watch the shit out of Sleepwalkers? Yeah. Let's give a big round of applause for our guests, you guys. All right, guys. You've been to Friday Night Frights before, you know. Before we'll start the show, Seb and I are going to count to 3 and ask you to scream as loud as you can or are willing to do.
And you're willing to do it
We're
loud.
willing to do it very loud. So 1,
2.
3. Excellent.